a paragliding session at Kamshet in Maharashtra where we met for the first time, and we just exchanged some notes, and then I realized he mentioned about parikrama, and then I got a little more interested, and I could feel the pull of parikrama right from that moment, and by God's grace I am here today to address you and to talk to you. I would like to aim this presentation basically to give you an overview of the Indian Army first, and then also give you an insight into the kind of life and the quality of life in the Army, so that you make your own assessment and you decide whether or not it suits you and would you like to join, and if so, which part of the Army you should consider joining. I will be doing this in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, and that should take about 50 minutes approximately, after which I will show you one or two websites of the Army, and we will go through with you some of those aspects mentioned in the websites, and then some video clips to give you an idea of the kind of life that we have in the Army. My only request to you is, you are bound to have lots of questions. I would request you to kindly keep those questions with you till I finish the presentation and mention of the websites and the video clips, and thereafter we'll have hopefully adequate time for you to ask your questions and for us to interact with each other. So I'll start with the presentation now. Next one, please. I'll give you a few general characteristics of the Indian Army. Some of you may not know that it's the fourth largest army in the world. The ones above us are the US Army, the Russian Army, and the People's Liberation Army of China. We, as an army, are very, very thoroughly professional and experienced. I say that because this is one of the very few armies in the world where we have live challenges every day of the year, in terms of mountain warfare, in terms of jungle warfare, in terms of desert warfare, in terms of terrain ridden with rivers and canals and water obstacles. We have problems of insurgency and militancy and terrorism. In addition, we are often called upon, very rightly, to handle the calamities, whether they are natural or man-made, and therefore we come to the aid of the civil authorities very often, as you would have observed. So we do have a very, very professional, experienced army. It is very, very disciplined. You will not notice it till you join the army that it is a very, very disciplined force. It is extremely well motivated. It is completely apolitical by design, and we are taught from day one to remain apolitical, which I think makes us as a very potent and dependable force. We are thoroughly secular in our actions, in our thoughts, in our approach. More of this when I come later to certain other aspects. And most of all, we are committed to the national security, and we understand the implications of national security very well. It is a major plus point that we enjoy a very good reputation at the global level. And the reason for that is that very often the United Nations depends on the Indian Army for certain operations in various countries. And we are called upon to meet those challenges, to send our contingents there, and invariably you will find out of 20-25 countries operating in that area, in that country for that particular mission. I would say at least 80% of the times you will find that of all the countries, the prize for the best contingent goes to Indian Army, every time, more or less. So we have a very good reputation, and for very good reason. It's a very clean and healthy life in the army, with perks that are affordable by our government. We are not pampered, at the same time we are well looked after. The army comprises three major components, and these are shown here: the combat arms, the supporting arms, and the services. More of this a little later. Lastly, I would like to mention that whenever a crisis occurs in our country, whether it is because of external aggression or internal strife or internal problems or calamities, natural calamities or man-made calamities of the kinds of earthquake and floods and so on, and when the other agencies of our country are assigned to do those jobs, and if for some reason or the other, if they are not able to handle those crises, then it is the army ultimately that sorts it out every time, and very, very dependable that way. So, even for the most critical crisis in our country, army is the last bastion. After that, there is nothing in our country. So that importance must be understood. Next, please. I would like to very briefly apprise you of the rank structure in the army. And this is put under two heads: the personnel below officer's rank, shortly PBOR, and commissioned officers. I'll start from the lowest rung, a sepoy. Then, as and when he gets promoted, he becomes a lance naik, who wears one stripe on the side. Yeah. Then two stripes, a naik, three stripes, a lance havaldar. Then a havaldar who wears three stripes and something on top of that, as this gentleman is wearing. Just turn around, please. Face them, face your shoulder. That is a havaldar. So this category of three ranks, that is lance naik, naik, havaldar, and havaldar, they come under the heading of non-commissioned officers or NCOs. The next level comes under a group called the junior commissioned officers or JCOs. In that, the lowest rung is Naib Subedar, who wears one star and one red and yellow colored stripe. The next is Subedar, and you have Subedar with us here today. He wears two stars and that yellow and red stripe. And thereafter, the next rank is Subedar Major, who wears the stripe and Ashoka lines above that, and not these two stars. So that makes him a Subedar Major. And these three, as I said, form the group of junior commissioned officers. Thereafter, selected junior commissioned officers of the ranks of Subedar Major, by a very thorough screening process, are considered for giving what is known as honorary ranks. And these honorary ranks could be for their meritorious service. They are either given the honorary rank of a lieutenant or an honorary captain. Honorary rank of a lieutenant would be wearing two stars, and an honorary captain would wear three stars and no stripes. Then we come to the junior most rank in the officers' cadre, a lieutenant, who also wears two stars, like the honorary lieutenant here. So if you looked at an honorary lieutenant and a lieutenant from the officers' cadre, if you only saw the shoulders, you would not be able to make out which one is what. But the moment you see their face, you would realize that an honorary lieutenant would have put in at least 30 to 35 years of service, whereas a lieutenant would have just joined the service after training. So the age is the difference. Then the next rank is captain, 3 stars. Next is a major, who wears an Ashoka lion on the shoulder. A lieutenant colonel, that means an Ashoka lion and a star. A colonel, 1 Ashoka lion and 2 stars, and in addition a red tab on the collars. Then you have a brigadier, 3 stars and an Ashoka lion. A major general with a sword and a baton crossed like this, and a star on the shoulder. A lieutenant general, baton and sword cross, and Ashoka line. And then you have only one gentleman, the chief of the army staff, who is of the rank of a general, and he wears the baton and sword, Ashok line, and one star. Incidentally, brigadiers and above also are authorized to put stars on their official vehicles. For instance, a brigadier would have one star on the star plate of the vehicle that he travels in, both in the front as also at the back. In addition, he is authorized to fly a flag, a triangular flag in the case of a brigadier, and that triangular flag will have one star on it. This is just to be able to identify that there is a brigadier traveling in that vehicle. A major general would have two star plates, two stars on the star plate, and on the flag he'll have a rectangular flag with a fish tail. That means the tail end of the flag is cut like a fish tail, and he would have two stars on the star plate and also on the flag. A lieutenant general, who's a three-star general, would have three stars on the vehicle, both front and rear, and would have a rectangular flag without the fish tail, a proper rectangular flag with three stars put on it, golden stars. So that is the kind of configuration that we have. And of course, the chief would have 4 stars on his star plate. So that much about the rank structure. Next, please. Okay, now I come to the various components of the army. I will start with combat arms. The infantry. I have also put down in brackets. Infantry is the component which fights on foot as foot soldiers closest to the enemy. It either holds the ground for own territory, or if and when required to attack the enemy on his ground, they are the ones who go and fight on the foot with their personal weapons, and when they capture that ground, they hold it physically with their personal weapons. I have put this in green because I also wanted to keep highlighting certain parts of their uniform so that you are able to understand when you meet somebody whether a person is from the infantry or any other arm. Therefore, I put this foot soldiers in green only to identify and tell you that a person from the infantry would have a cap which is called a beret, B-E-R-E-T. T is silent, it is pronounced beret, and infantryman will have a green beret. All regiments of the infantry will wear green except one category or one regiment called the parachute regiment. They have a special privilege of wearing maroon berets for very good reasons, because those people are firstly volunteers for something much more risky and more adventurous, and their training is more rigorous. They take more risks, they take special missions, and therefore they have the privilege of wearing maroon berets. And to earn that maroon beret, they have to go through additional probation periods and additional tests to be able to be cleared and qualified as paratroopers. The armored corps. These are the people who sit in tanks and have major weapons with them on board, the main gun of a tank, and they have subsidiary or secondary armament in terms of medium machine guns and so on mounted on the tank. I hope you know which tank I am talking about. It is a vehicle which has tracks and not wheels. It can do very good cross-country movement across sand dunes, across various kinds of obstacles. It can even be an amphibious tank. It can go through water and climb all sorts of obstacles. So these are the people who operate in tanks. They are well protected by a steel armament all around them and steel armor. And these people wear black berets. So I put tanks in black. These are the two combat arms. Then we have combat support arms. Artillery. Artillery people are the ones who fire big guns, artillery guns. like field guns, 105 mm caliber, medium guns, 130 millimeters, which has a range of up to about 28 to 30 kilometers. Then you have 155 howitzers and 155 Bofors, which can fire up to a range of about 45 kilometers with various kinds of ammunition. So 45 kilometers from where the gun is, it can fire accurately at a point and bring down all kinds of effective fire very, very efficiently. So these people are the gunners, as we call them, and they wear blue beret. Then we have the army aviation people. They are the ones who fly army aviation helicopters. They wear a headgear which is grey in color, grey or sky blue. It's a kind of a blend of the two. Army air defense. Now these people are the ones who ensure that the enemy air elements, enemy's aircraft, do not cause any harm to our own areas, to our own troops, to our own army and own civil establishments of strategic importance. The Army Air Defense people work in conjunction with the Air Force component of Air Defense, and these two are very well integrated and coordinated. Then we have the Corps of Engineers. Now this is the corps to which I belong and where I have served for 40 years and 3 months. And we have in the Corps of Engineers 4 major components. We refer to them as the 4 pillars of the Corps of Engineers. The first one and the most important one is the combat engineers. These are the ones who provide close engineer support in battle areas on own side as also on the enemy side, to make sure that our own troops are provided the kind of mobility that is required for them to operate and to move and to function. At the same time, we deny this mobility to the enemy by creating obstacles for the enemy, by blowing up their bridges and by destroying their bridges, by putting mines so that they cannot move freely and safely and come and attack us. Similarly, when we protect our own territory and our own troops, we put mines on the ground. I wonder if you know what mines really means. Mines are the explosive devices which can cause damage either to a person or to a vehicle or a tank, and these are normally buried into the ground, and they are well camouflaged and concealed, and if somebody tries to cross or step over those or even go close to them, then they detonate or they blow up and the person or the vehicle or the gun gets totally destroyed. So the job of combat engineers, one of the various jobs of combat engineers is to put these mines on the ground for our own protection, as also when our enemy, we have to go and attack the enemy, we go and breach and neutralize the enemy's minefields with our hands, with our equipment. And that is a very, very serious business, very risky, needs a lot of training and needs a lot of moral and physical courage to do, because one wrong move and you're gone. Not only are you gone, people around you are also gone. So that is part of our job. Similarly, making bridges, making roads, operational tracks, making helipads in the battle area for evacuation of casualties, for reinforcement of certain troops if required in a hurry, for urgent movement of ammunition, and a whole lot of requirements. So making of helipads, making of advanced landing grounds or short airstrips in the forward area is also part of the job of Corps of Engineers. Providing water supply in the battlefield is also job of combat engineers. And it's a very long list of what you can do and what you're expected to do as combat engineers for the army. So that is the first component. The second main pillar or the component of Corps of Engineers is what is known as MES for short, and it means Military Engineer Service. These are the people who are responsible for planning and executing major works in terms of buildings, roads, airfields, dry docks, naval docks and so on for the 3 services. And mind you, MES is not only for the army, MES is meant for the Air Force as also the Navy. Therefore, the Engineer-in-Chief, who is the head of the engineers, is actually responsible to and reports directly to the Army Chief, the Air Chief and the Naval Chief. You have free access to meet the three chiefs. Then we have the Border Roads Organization, which is primarily to plan, to construct, to maintain and to repair major roads along the border. And incidentally, although BRO comes under the Ministry of Surface Transport, in operations they are taken over for control purposes by the Engineer-in-Chief, and the Army dictates all the directions and actions to be taken. So BRO is the third pillar of the Corps of Engineers. And lastly, the military survey component, which takes care of all the requirements of survey, whether it is aerial or ground or hydrographic survey, for the Army, for the Navy or for the Air Force. So military survey people from the Corps of Engineers take care of that requirement. And they obviously are they operate in conjunction with Survey of India or the central government. Coming to the next component, signals. Signals are the people who take care of all the requirements of communications of all kinds. Wireless communication, telephone communication, field telephone communication, and it is not just providing the communications or the equipment, it is also to see that our information does not get leaked out to the enemy, and therefore secrecy devices also are incorporated into all these systems. And it is their job to keep making these codes, to modify those codes, and also to try and break the enemy's codes so that we are able to get some information through their communication. So anything to do with communications is signals people. Incidentally, all these people shown in blue, the artillery, the Army Air Defense, the engineers and signals. As shown here, it's all blue, therefore they also wear blue colored berets. Then you have the Intelligence Corps. Their job, as the name suggests, is to acquire and analyze and come to certain inferences and share those inferences with the higher commanders to give them all the input. They also function 365 into 24, peacetime or war, and they keep acquiring information, sifting it, analyzing it, giving inferences to all commanders at all levels, chief downwards. And earlier this used to be part of the infantry, but when they got separated, and because they were from the infantry, they used to wear a green beret, but they have been allowed to carry on with this tradition. Coming to services, these are the people who are not so close to the enemy. They are a little more in depth, they are in slightly safer areas, they are still part of the war zone, but relatively more safe. Now, various responsibilities of these people. The Army Service Corps provides rations, fuel and transport. Transport primarily in addition to what all these components have. All these components already have their vehicles, but if they need additional transport, then that's second line and third line transport requirements are met by ASC, Army Service Corps. We have the next one, Army Ordnance Corps, the Military Nursing Service, or MNS for short. And they, because I put the color here, their uniform is not olive green, they wear this colored uniform. And they have red shoulder tabs. We have the Remount Veterinary Corps that looks after animals, the animals of the army, which primarily are three categories: the horses, the mules and the dogs, army dogs. More about army dogs a little later when I show you the video clips. The Army Education Corps is another small corps which is responsible for taking care of the requirements of education of people in uniform, particularly people below the officer's rank. Whatever education these people need, whether for their own promotion or for their general education is provided by the Army Education Corps. We have the Army Postal Service. They do the job of what the Post and Telegraph Department does. They take care of all the movement of the dark, which can be of various kinds. From secrecy point of view, it could be unclassified, which has no secrecy, or it could be restricted information, it could be confidential, it could be secret, it could even be top secret. So they make sure that secrecy is not compromised. Then you have another very small branch called JAG branch, or Judge Advocate General branch, that takes care of all the legal requirements of the Army, either between the Army and any other government or private agency, or within the Army if there are any litigations. And lastly, the Corps of Military Police, which plays a very important role with regard to two aspects. One is movement and control of traffic, which may look very simple. If you compare it with what goes on here as traffic control, it is quite different from what these people have to do, because movement in the Army firstly mostly takes place at night. Mostly when we mobilize for war, we move in terms of hundreds and thousands of vehicles, not only vehicles like jeeps and trucks, also tanks, guns, dozers and all kinds of equipment, very heavy equipment. Therefore, to be able to move them efficiently, safely and speedily is quite a job, and that these people do. The second responsibility of theirs is to ensure that the discipline within the Army is maintained. Whenever there are cases of any indiscipline, these are the first people who rush and try and control, and then they inform the higher authorities, and adequate and timely disciplinary action is taken. These people, military police people, two ways to identify them. Firstly, their headgear, the beret, is bright red, scarlet. And they also wear white colored belts, and the shoulder titles are also, they have a white backing under the stars. So that's one indication you'll be able to make. Right, next please. Okay, I will now very quickly talk about the selection process for officers. There are numerous types of entries, some regulars, some short service, some short service technical, some short service non-technical, some for men, some for women, some for NCC cadets and so on. Lots of entries, which I'm sure you are not even aware of. Everybody thinks joining army there is only one way, and that is not the case. So various types of entries, including for women, and for each of those there are qualitative requirements. We will see some of these when we get down to seeing the websites later. Depending on the type of the entry, the process comprises screening and interviewing at colleges, a written examination through Union Public Service Commission, a 5 days process through a Services Selection Board, short form is SSB. Thereafter, if you've gone through these and if you're selected, there'll be a medical examination for which the army doctors take on, and they do all the examination. There are laid down medical standards for every type of entry. Then those who are selected, those who are medically fit, a merit list is made for these candidates to become officers, and depending on the number of vacancies for that entry, these people, they make a merit list, and these people are then given instructions in writing to join the training establishments to become officers. Therefore, after all this, the training starts at the respective places. The duration, the type of training and the qualitative requirements for those training are different for each type of training. Once a person has successfully completed the training, that person is commissioned as an officer into the Indian Army. And the first rank that he wears is first lowest rank, I just told you, lieutenant, army officer, youngest, lieutenant, 2 stars after all the training. Thereafter, further training, progression, examinations for promotion, examinations for their educational qualifications, all that takes place within the system. Next. I will now talk of the level of personnel below officer's rank or PBOR. That means Sepoy upwards up to Subedar Major. First of all, the Army headquarters at Delhi predetermines vacancies arms-wise, service-wise and trades-wise. These are disseminated to lower levels. Prior publicity through newspapers and websites of the Army. Requirements and standards are spelled out in these websites and in the notices in the newspapers. Depending on the type of the entry, recruiting is done through various tests at zonal recruiting offices, also known as ZROs, or at regimental centers. Now, every regiment has a regimental center. For example, some of you would know we have a Madras Engineer Group and Center near Ulsur Lake, and these gentlemen who are with me in uniform, the Subedar Sahab and the Havaldar, they are both from the Madras Engineer Group and Center. That's one of the many regimental centers. As I said, each regiment has a regimental center, and they also do recruiting as a part of recruitment. Medical examination is done for those who clear all the tests, physical and other tests, and the medical examination is done by the Army Medical Corps, by Army doctors, either at the military hospital, the local one, or the nearest military hospital. It's a very fair system, I want to assure you. There is no question of favoritism, there is no question of a bias, and no single person in the selection system can unilaterally decide to reject or accept a person for recruitment. I can assure you of that. The selected recruits are then trained at regimental centers. The type of training and the duration of training depends upon whether he is from the arms or services or combat arms or whatever. On successful completion of training, the recruits are enrolled as trained soldiers. Next. Now, having given you this background, I want to now focus on why you should consider joining the Army, and that I think should interest you the most. So, some financial benefits I thought I would highlight. The first one is job security. Once you are selected to be either an officer or below the officer rank, unless you do something very stupid or something which is not acceptable, your job is secure. You will get your pay on the first of every month or on the last day of that month, depending on whether you are an officer or you are not under the officer category, but you will get your pay. So job security is a major point. Canteen facilities. There is a tremendous difference in the prices between your household common usage goods like your toiletry and your rations and so on, and what you get from the canteen for the military is much cheaper than what you get outside. So you save a lot of money. Being from the forces, you can make use of these facilities to the tune of at least about 40% or sometimes even more than 40% you can save. Additional allowances for special skills and for postings in difficult areas. When you are posted in very difficult areas like very high altitude, snowbound area, Siachen Glacier and so on, you go through a very tough life, and the government compensates you by giving you additional allowances. Similarly, when you acquire special skills like paratroopers, they get a parachute pay or parachute allowance. Those who go a step higher to become combat free fall parachutists, or they form part of special forces, they get even more additional benefits, financial benefits, allowances. So if you're in high altitude, you get high altitude allowance. If you're even higher, you get more allowance. When you're in uncongenial climate area, you get some other allowance. So all kinds of allowances are permissible. Medical cover. This is one of the biggest plus points of joining the army. You cannot imagine the kind of financial burden it can put on people who unfortunately fall ill and you need to get treated in civil. But in the army, for everything you have medical cover, you get all kinds of treatment and tests done free of cost, completely free of cost. Starting from just a blood sample for your blood test, going right up to cancer, heart transplant, hip replacement, this and whatever. Everything is free. It's free not only for you, it is also free for the family. It is free for the wife or the husband of the person who's in uniform. It is also free for the children, dependent children of the person who's in uniform. It is also free for the dependent parents of the person in uniform. It's a major advantage. Army Group Insurance Scheme. Every person in army uniform is covered by insurance under what is known as the Army Group Insurance Scheme, for which, depending on your rank and age, you pay a certain amount of premium every month or once a year or once in 6 months, whatever. But you are covered up to a certain amount, not only till you serve in the army, but even after the retirement for a certain amount of period, like 5 years or 7 years. So you are well covered and protected from all kinds of unpleasant incidents. Training and skill development at no personal expense. The moment you join the army, thereafter your training, professional training, educational training, skill development in your respective trades or specializations, everything is free of cost to you. You do not need to spend any money. I'll give you an example, my own example. I am from a Sainik school. I was in a Sainik school called Kunjpura in Haryana. I joined that school when I was 13 years old. From there, after about 2 years, in class 10, I appeared for National Defence Academy entrance exam. So after 10th, my education was taken care of by the government. When I passed out from National Defence Academy, Pune, after 3 years of training, I was given that inter-science certificate. Then, after my training in IMA of 1 year, and my total training for officers was total 4 years. After that, I got commissioned as a lieutenant, second lieutenant. Those days, we had another rank called second lieutenant with 1 star. Then, after young officers course, at the cost of the army, I did my degree course in engineering from the army, from College of Military Engineering. I did BE Mechanical, and then I got my graduation certificate. After that, if you are lucky and if you work hard enough, you get selected for doing a staff course at Defence Services Staff College at Wellington, which is not very far from here. And if you do a certain amount of extra work, you can get a master's degree. And I got my master's degree in Defence Studies from then Madras University that time. So what I'm trying to say is, at no personal cost, you are adding to your education, free of cost. Concessions and incentives by the government, both central government as also state government. And there are lots of awards and incentives, particularly for those who get gallantry awards. And central government of course gives, and in addition, depending on which state you belong to, the state government also adds on to those incentives and concessions. Lastly, pension. Now this is again a very, very major plus point, because once you put in the minimal pensionable service, which depends on your rank, after that you get pension for the rest of your life. Not only that, during service, if you happen to get injured, or you lose a limb, or you lose a finger, or you lose an arm, or you lose a leg, or whatever happens, you get what is known as disability pension, including disability. And the degree of disability is decided by a board of doctors, and they decide whether a person has been disabled to what degree. Is it 10% of disability? Is it 20%, 30%, 40% of what? So accordingly, the disability pension also goes up. And this disability pension is in addition to your basic pension. Similarly, if a person unfortunately dies while on duty or dies in operations or in war, the next of kin of that person, that means if it's a Jawan or an officer, his wife will get what is known as family pension for the rest of that person's life. So it's a major advantage. So these are some of the financial benefits of joining the army. Next please. The other facilities which are provided by the army, which you must know, and I'm sure some of you won't even know. Accommodation is either free or it is at nominal charges. Children's education through Army Welfare Education Scheme or AWES. We have very well selected faculty and teaching staff, at least B.Ed if not M.Ed, and well experienced teachers, mostly from army background, who take on these jobs in the form of army public schools, and there are a whole lot of these army public schools all over the country, and when a person gets posted from one station to the other, it's very easy for them to switch over from one army public school to the other. And a very well evolved and well tried out system for education for the children. We have a system called the Army Wives Welfare Association or AWWA. We call it AWA. The wives of all the army officers and other ranks, starting from the wife of the chief down to the wife of a sepoy, have created an organization called AWA. Their charter of duties includes welfare of the families and the children. They have a very vast canvas to cover, and they create funds through donations and by various means, and they handle this requirement of family welfare and guidance and career counseling and resolving personal problems of Jawans and their families extremely well. So this is another advantage. Sports and adventure. Now, I have put this bold letters here, vast scope, because a lot of you will not know the kind of facilities that the army provides you for sports. Believe me, there is not a single sport that you can think of which is not available in the army. You name the sport, it is there in the army. It's ground-based, you can do mountaineering, skiing and all sorts of other adventure activities. Postings all over the country. You, by the time you finish 20 to 25 years of service, you would have seen the entire country. Northern sector, northeastern sector, Jammu and Kashmir, central India, western coast, Gujarat and so on, Rajasthan, down south, everywhere. You would have seen the entire country. And the best part is, if you as an individual or if your unit collectively has performed well, you will be selected to take part in UN operations where, depending on which country you go to and for what jobs you are going, you will get additional pay and allowances, which very often are much more than what you get as your pay and allowances in our country. So that is additional income, additional experience, additional opportunity for you to interact with people from the army of other countries. Pre-retirement training for settlement. The army also takes care of you just before you retire. 6 months before you retire, they will guide you and train you in a facet of your choice, so that after retirement you can take on that as your secondary job. There is a department called Department of Resettlement. They take care of all this. Leave. This is another major plus point of the army. I don't think there would be any other organization, at least in our country, where you can get so much of leave. 60 days of leave in a year, annual leave, and 20 days of casual leave. That is what your entitlement is, all ranks. But there are some riders to it which I'll come to later. The best part or the best plus point I would say is what I've underlined here, which is not tangible. You can't feel it that way, you cannot see it till you are part of the army. And that is the regimental bonding and camaraderie. When you start operating together, when you take risks together, when you are in crisis together, when you help out each other, the kind of bonding and camaraderie that builds up is absolutely unique. The longer you have been together, the stronger is the bond. The more risky the job that you do, the stronger is the bond. I'll give you an example of our own. All the skydivers that I have been jumping with and all the free fall that we have done, we have a lifelong strong bond amongst us. If one person amongst us gets to know that somebody is in trouble, automatically that job will come and offer help. And similarly, there are examples. Next. Now, I would, by design, I have chosen to bring out these. I would be failing in my duty if I did not apprise you of some constraints and drawbacks or limitations of the army. The first one, I want to tell you, life is not easy. It is tough life. It is tough not only physically, it is also tough mentally. So unless you can prepare yourselves to make yourselves physically and mentally tough, you will find it difficult. Postings in remote areas and environment which poses a lot of mental stress on you, those are difficult conditions. Therefore, you have to prepare yourselves and accept that if you want to serve in the army. Separation from families. Very often when you are posted in difficult areas or high altitude or in the jungle terrain or non-family stations, you would have to leave the family at one chosen place for which you will get accommodation, but you will be staying separately for that duration and get your annual leave and get your leave and come back and meet your family and then go back again. So separation of the family is one of the factors you must understand and accept, and only then join the army. Isolation from civil society. By the nature of our job in the army and the quality of life and our traditions and customs and so on, by and large you will find the army people and their families are living in areas which are self-sufficient in their own way. Therefore, they really don't need to interact with civil society. So, when these people retire, they realize the gap between their priorities, their likes, their dislikes, their habits, and those of people outside the army society. So that comes as a shock. And it takes a little time for one from the army to get used to this disparity and then adjust ourselves. But that is where your adaptability would come in handy. Children's education I have already touched upon. Frequently, because the postings occur very frequently, either you have to choose a base and leave your family and children and let them carry on with that school or college, or you move with the person of the army, take the children and the family along and keep switching from schools and colleges to wherever you go. The choice is yours, but it is a factor you must know. Leave. I touched upon the quantity of leave, but please remember, this is very important for you to know. It is not a right. In the army, it is not a right to get your leave. It is a privilege. Therefore, you cannot claim that you want your leave, let us say from 10th of July for the next 60 days. The system, your superiors will decide whether they can afford to let you go for 60 days at a time, or are there any major operational commitments or other major commitments for which you are required in the organization. So you may have to modify your leave. It will not be denied, it may get delayed, it may have to be split into smaller portions, but it is not a right, it is a privilege, which is not the case in civil. Next. Now, lastly, this is my last slide. There are some guidelines for you to join. Now, please pay attention here because this is the crux of what I am saying. First of all, you must analyze and decide why you want to join the army. Please remember, it is not just a means of earning livelihood. It is a commitment with a lot of discipline, a lot of demands on you. Of course, it gives you a lot of pride and satisfaction, but it is not just a means of getting a salary. So if you think you can join the army after having not been able to get into any other slot, just giving an example, suppose somebody wanted to try to get into police, didn't make it there, tried BSF, didn't make it there, tried joining an engineering college or something, didn't make it there, then tried commerce, didn't work. Okay, now let's join the army. You can't do that. You have to be committed because nation comes first for the army. It probably comes first for the others also, but we are far more conscious and committed to this requirement. You have to be prepared to work hard. Army is no place for passengers or drifters, as we call them. Army needs go-getters. Either you make yourself a go-getter by working hard, getting your priorities right, getting your habits right, or even if you join, you will not last very well, you will not be happy, the system will not be happy with you because you won't perform. And if you do not perform, you won't get your reports of the right kind of order, you won't get your promotions, you won't get your pay and allowances to the degree that you want, and therefore there will be disgruntlement and you won't like it. So please remember that. Discipline required in the army is of a very high standard. That discipline does not mean only physical discipline of just being punctual and wearing the correct types of clothes at the right time at the right place. It also means much more of mental discipline. You need to be able to control your emotions, control your fear, control your anger, because as you rise, your responsibility increases. For every person under your command, you are responsible for that person's life, because if you do not give the right order at the right time, that person will die. Therefore, this is very important. Physical fitness again is very important in the army, because unless you are physically fit, even your mental efficiency suffers, your output suffers. So you need to toughen yourself. What you need to do, we will cover in the question and answer session. Mental robustness, very, very important, as important as physical fitness, if not more important. Maturity and balance in adverse situations. Rest assured, when you join the army, there will be lots of adverse situations where you will have to deal with very, very unfavorable situations. Somebody's just died, or somebody's leg has got blown off, or there's a major fatal accident, or there's a natural calamity, somebody's got electrocuted through wires hanging in a flood relief situation. In an earthquake, somebody's fallen deep down and he's howling and you need to recover that person. So, in adverse situations, unless you have maturity and balance and the ability to take the right kinds of decisions in time, it becomes difficult. So mental robustness is very important. You have to keep a cool and calm head, and this is required more and more as you go higher and higher and higher in rank. Moral values, extremely important. You have to have impeccable records in terms of integrity, honesty. You have to have courage, not only physical courage, but more importantly, moral courage. If by mistake you do something wrong, have the moral courage to get up and say, yes, I went wrong, it is my fault. And once you do that, even your subordinates will respect you much more. And if you try and lie or make a wrong statement, first person who gets to know you are your subordinates. They can see through it. So moral courage is very important. Team spirit Equally important, I would like to mention this to you because as and when you choose to join the army and if you go through the services selection board, one of the major positive assets they are looking for is team spirit. You may be the best athlete, you may be the best whatever, but if you are not thinking of helping your own team and you're only interested in coming first in a race, you will not get the kind of credit that somebody who may be third in the race, but he's also helping the others who are last in the race. So your cooperation, your team spirit is very important in the army because everything happens in the army as a team. The requirement of learning. You have to do a lot of reading and a lot of interaction with the right kind of people. And please remember, it is never too late to learn anything. Don't ever think at any age, please do not think at any age, and I'm also addressing the faculty, I'm saying the same thing. Don't ever think, oh, I'm already 35, I'm already 40, it's too late for me, for anything. For God's sake, no. I want to just share my personal thing. I met Mr. Bhaskar barely 3 months back. Both of us had decided to learn paragliding for the first time in our lives. I'm about to be 71 years old, but decided to learn something. What's wrong with it? Never too late. Just make up your mind. If God has given you a good body and a sound mind, there's no reason why you shouldn't do it or can't do it. If anybody else with the same assets can do it, why can't you? So don't ever let age affect your decisions or actions.